And welcome back to the show, everybody. I want to welcome in an audience from Tide 100.9, Birmingham, Tuscaloosa, also PGA Tour Radio on Sirius XM, and our YouTube channel, The Old Gab Box. Check us out. That's the video version as well. Hey, our guest today is one of the most famous caddies in the history of professional golf, Jim Bones Mackay. And now, if you haven't already, you watch him on NBC Sports, the great golf team there with the Hall of Famer Tommy Roy calling all the shots. And if you listen to Bones like I do, great insight and educates you on what's going on in the game of golf, and I think it's awesome. And I can't believe he's on the show. Bones, great to see you, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. It's just terrific.
Yeah, it's fun. I didn't realize, and you and I go way back, and I've been out there walking inside the ropes when you were caddying, and now you're on NBC. I didn't realize, Bones, that Freddie Couples actually gave you the nickname Bones. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, about 3 or 4 months into my caddy life in 1990, I was caddying for Larry Mize. We went to a tournament in Paris. And at that time, you know, when you're a new caddy, certainly probably the same way today, nobody knows your name until you've been out there for a definitive amount of time. And we were hanging out one night at dinner, all the players, their wives, and the caddies, and Freddie didn't know my name, certainly from anybody else, any of the other caddies on that trip. And the players went through the buffet line after a long day at the golf course. Freddie had this steaming plate of food. He sat down to eat and had no silverware. So he looked for the silverware. It was back there at the end of the line. He saw this very tall, skinny guy standing there and started yelling out these random names, none of which were mine, to bring him a knife and fork. And he finally yelled out Bones because I was so skinny. I brought him a knife and fork. I was Bones the rest of the trip and have been since that day. So I'm very appreciative of Freddie for doing that, because a lot of guys had nicknames that they didn't want to tell grandma back in those days. So to have a G-rated nickname like Bones was lucky for me.
You know, I'd never heard that story. I was doing a little research before you came on. I'd never heard that story. And the fact that Freddie Couples gave you the nickname is awesome. And sports nicknames are the best, right? And Bones absolutely has stuck over the years. I mean, I call you Jim when I see you, but I think most people just say, hey, Bones, right?
That's exactly right. You know, typically if someone says Jim when we're out there on the tour, you know, working for NBC or caddying, I don't even turn around because I know they're not asking for me. So it's been Bones since pretty much day one, thanks to Fred.
And, you know, it's interesting for our listeners and the people watching. I'm out there inside the ropes for the radio, and it is amazing how many people yell your name, Jim. I mean, Bones, 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 Bones. I mean, you're used to it, but, I mean, that's got to still feel pretty special, right?
That's incredibly nice of folks to do that. It's nice to hear people know who you are, and hopefully I'm doing a good enough job for NBC that they appreciate the job that I'm doing there. And that's what I love about golf. It's where it takes you and the people that you ultimately encounter out there on the road. And I've encountered many wonderful people and forged a lot of great relationships over the years. And it's nice to be recognized like that.
And Bones, I didn't realize, I mean, obviously you and Phil, I mean, that's the bulk of a great career for both you and him. But you mentioned Larry Mize, and I didn't know you also carried for Curtis Strange a short time and Scott Simpson. I mean, you carried the bag for some obviously major champions, but I mean, these are heavyweight guys, been out there a long time.
Yes, certainly. Scott Simpson in the beginning of 1992. He's one of my all-time favorite people in the history of the game. And the very first day I ever went to work for him, we were driving to the golf course at the old Bob Hope event in Palm Springs. And he said to me, if you ever get offered a job better than one working for me, I would expect you to take it, which I thought was an odd thing for him to say to me on the very first day of work for him. And I thought, well, I'm not going anywhere. I'm loving what I'm doing working for you. And 2 or 3 months later, the Mickelson job kind of fell into my lap.
Wow.
So I took Scott up on his offer, but he handled everything with incredible class. And to this day, as I said, one of my favorite people. And Curtis Strange was my favorite golfer in junior high school, and college. So to get on he had a rotation of guys in the early 90s. He didn't want to have a full-time caddy. So to get on that rotation and work for him several times, including once at St. Andrews, was one of the real thrills of my caddy career.
How tough was Curtis on a caddy? Was he tough? Seems like he was tough.
He's a tough guy, but not, I wouldn't say tough on caddies. You know, he's very intense. Certainly expects a lot out of you. But in my experience with him, he's more, that intense, kind of incredibly focused guy on the golf course than he is tough on caddies. And, certainly if we all know as caddies when we screw up and make a mistake, and, we're the first ones that realize it when the ball lands where it's not supposed to. So I never had a situation with Curtis when he was anything other than just incredibly fun to be around.
Bones, have you ever thought about writing a book? I mean, you have so many stories. I mean, listen, I love golf. I would read the book. Have you ever thought about it?
I've thought about it. I've certainly been offered the opportunity to do it on 2 or 3 occasions. The thing about it is, they want, they being the publishers or the go-between, that they want certain things that you just don't want to write about, having spent, so much time inside the ropes for so many years. And the one thing I would never want to do is to tell a story that I shouldn't, hurt someone's feelings based on the fact that I was, kind of in the kitchen with them out there at work.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that, and that says a lot about you as well. Hey, let's take you to the PGA Championship this week. Quail Hollow, obviously a place you're very familiar with. It's a big hitters golf course, but the rain is coming down, Bones. I think it's stopped for the moment as we record this interview, but more rain is coming. That'll obviously change conditions. I don't know if it'll change it dramatically or not, but it certainly changes a little bit of strategy, right, Bones, as you get prepared for the PGA with a wet course?
It certainly does. I mean, the one thing that jumps into my mind about what they're dealing with now is the potential for mud balls, and could they possibly play the ball up, so to speak, at a major championship, which, of course, Kerry Haig, who runs the event, desperately doesn't want to do. But certainly it factors into the clubs that you might have in the bag, given the fact that the rough is going to be wet. And there's a big difference between wet rough and, of course, dry, summery rough that you would have otherwise if the weather was good. I think that it's a very interesting golf course, as you know, and I feel like, you better put the ball in play off the tee. As you said, it's a big golf course, but I can't imagine that you're going to want to play from the Bermuda rough this time of year and have any kind of control over your golf ball. So whatever it takes to put it on the short grass, I'm sure is what guys are going to want to do.
A year ago, Rory just dominated the golf course and hit it over the corners and up and over these trees. We really had never seen anybody attack it like that. I can't see with the conditions and the rough up that is going to be a game plan again. I think that could spell trouble if you get too aggressive. Am I right or wrong?
I think you're right. I think certainly on holes like 16, you could probably take a pretty aggressive line off the tee, given the fact there's water up the left side of that fairway. But to your point, I think that it's going to be fairway first a lot more than we're used to seeing at that event. And I think Johnny Harris, who owns the golf course, is going to do everything he can to protect the integrity of it and keep the guys from going, ultra low.
Hey, Bones, tell me this, because obviously you're out there a lot, and I didn't realize you've been out at NBC since 2017. My goodness, time is flying. Right now, as I go out, it just seems like the PGA Tour is on an upswing with all that's happened the last few years. I mean, ratings are up. We had an incredible Masters with Rory winning. Scotty seems back in form. More people are watching the digital PGA Tour Live, which I'm involved with. I don't know, Bones. It just seems like the PGA Tour right now is super positive. Is that the vibe? Or, I mean, is it because I'm working out there, or do you get the same kind of vibe?
100% agree with you. I think they're riding an incredible wave of momentum right now. I think they've distanced themselves from, any other tours that may want to, grab a piece of the pie, so to speak. I think the PGA Tour's done it the right way, and they're holding, true to what their values are, which is, individual golf tournaments played that I think the people at home love to watch. And to your point about, certainly Rory McIlroy, Scotty Scheffler. Now, I was worried about how hurt Scotty was with that accident he had in the offseason, and certainly his play at the Byron Nelson a couple of weeks ago in Dallas proves that he should be 100%. And of course, heading after that victory into Charlotte this week. We've got these incredible players. They're incredible young men. Justin Thomas is playing incredible golf. I love what the tour has done with the access for the best college player each year.
Yeah.
And these young kids coming out. I just think the tour has made a series of spectacularly positive and healthy decisions. And I think we're riding that wave as a result of it.
Bones, I wanted to ask you this too, because it is interesting. You've been out there a long time. I've been out there a long time. But, and obviously there's different eras. The Tiger era, and Phil was heavily involved, and Ernie Els was great, and Greg Norman kind of at the beginning was still a factor. The Jack era. I mean, but it seems right now, and those names you just mentioned, it seems like the difference between number 1 and number 100 is razor thin, more so than it's ever been. I mean, it's harder to win major championships now, certainly more than one than it's ever been. I mean, agree or disagree with that statement?
No, I completely agree. It's funny you should say that. I was talking to someone the other day about J.J. Spawn, who we saw early in the year lose a playoff to Rory McIlroy at the Players' Championship, about how incredibly impressive this guy is to watch go about his business on the PGA Tour. He hits it where he's looking. He's very solid. He's got plenty of length off the tee. And if you told me in a few weeks that he contended at Oakmont in the U.S. Open, I wouldn't be surprised in the least. And I'm not sure what JJ's world ranking is. I'm guessing it's, in the 40s, 50s, 60s. I'm not exactly sure. It actually could be a little better than that, maybe 30s or 40s. But he's a wonderful, wonderful player, and just, proof positive again of how deep the tour is. And there's a reason why all these guys want to come over from Europe and play on the PGA Tour and make our fields that much better. Rasmus Højgaard, who's now over here quite a bit, playing with his twin brother. They're proving to be wonderful players. And I think it just gears up for some incredible things, not to mention the Ryder Cup down the road that you spoke of earlier that's going to be played later this fall.
It is interesting. Sepp Straka wins and is now top 10 in the official World Golf rankings. 3 or 4 years ago, nobody knew who Sepp Straka was, and he'll be on that European Ryder Cup team again. Andrew Novak has now climbed inside the top 30 of FedEx Cup points. He's on the radar screen for the Ryder Cup. I mean, I don't know, Bones. It's exciting. We're going to have some newbies, let's put it that way, on both the European and the U.S. Ryder Cup team. I don't think there's any question about it.
I think you're right. And I think that both captains, certainly Luke Donald right now is in, and the way his team is playing, the way that the European team is stacking up is nothing short of phenomenal at the moment. They've won all the big tournaments this year on the tour, with Rory winning the Players and the Masters certainly, and also at Pebble Beach. But, as a guy that will be a neutral observer that week, doing it for television on NBC, I can say that I think that the Americans hopefully are rounding into form. Certainly, Scotty Scheffler, Justin Thomas. We need to see Xander Schauffele start playing better. He's obviously coming back from his injury, but hasn't gained a whole lot of momentum. But also, as you mentioned, Andrew Novak, and certainly you're going to see some newbies, as you say. But what's, I think, incredibly important is that these newbies, or anybody for that matter, match up to this golf course. This is a big boy golf course, and it's likely to be played in less than ideal weather. It could play even longer, if you will, if they have some rain or some chilly temperatures. So I wouldn't want for a team I was rooting for to have guys make the team they're going to be completely overmatched by the golf course. And
Bones, listen, it's at Bethpage in New York City. I mean, it's going to be, I don't want this to sound like hyperbole, because, there's a lot of major championships and big events, but this might be, when they go TV ratings, the crowd, the electricity, this might be the biggest golf event we've had. With all due respect to Tiger and all what he brought to the table, Bones, this is going to be pretty incredible. This might be the biggest thing we've had in a decade or so.
I agree. I think this is going to be must-see television for sure. Just grab your popcorn, get on the couch there Friday morning and be ready to roll, because it's going to be the most intense. It's going to be chippy, as the Ryder Cup gets sometimes. It's going to be next level. And one of the things, there's so much to respect about Rory McIlroy. And I remember he did an interview a few years ago where he said he wouldn't really consider a year in which his team lost the Ryder Cup to be a happy year for him, no matter what else he did. And certainly he's won the Masters. He's won a bunch of tournaments this year. He's probably going to win a bunch more. He's going into this Ryder Cup, as he does every single one of them, with just hell bent on bringing home the trophy. And of course, you've got guys, as we've mentioned, with Sepp Straka, Shane Lowry, and so many of the Europeans playing well. The Americans really, really have their work cut out for them, but it's going to be an event. I think it's going to be amazing to see who we see walking inside the ropes that week. In terms of people coming to a Ryder Cup you're not used to seeing. We've certainly seen Michael Jordan at a number of them, but
yeah.
I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be very interested in taking that week, given what we're looking at.
Hey, Bones, obviously these guys all want to win major championships. That's the goal. Win as many championships as you can get, obviously, but the Ryder Cup, you've been inside the team room, the ropes, the whole 9 yards, on the bag, doing it for NBC Sports. In talking to the guys who've been involved, Keegan, number one, gets very emotional when he talks about it. Obviously, he's the captain now. This seems like it might be, for a lot of these guys, the biggest thing, bigger than major championships. It's crazy how important this Ryder Cup is, not just this year, but now whenever it happens.
It is. It's crazy important to these guys.
Yeah.
You'll see guys this year that don't handle the pressure of making the Ryder Cup team. They won't play as well in that second year as they did in the first, and maybe we'll lose out on points. You go back in history, at least in my 35 years on the tour, guys that try so hard they end up getting in their own way. There are going to be guys that change their schedule to add tournaments to ultimately make the team. And I was talking with Sahith Theegala about it after he played on the President's Cup team. You play in one of these team events, and you want to play in every single one of them in the worst way. And for guys like Sahith that have played in a President's Cup and just hear that the Ryder Cup is the President's Cup, on steroids, so to speak, or that much bigger.
Wow.
and better. It pumps these guys up. And that's what, one of the things I tell people all the time, that's what I love about golf is to this point, at least, these guys do this for no money whatsoever. I know there's some charitable contributions, but these guys want to play and wear their flag of their nation or their continent on their chest, represent their peers, represent the countries and the boys at home, and just go to battle. And I think that we'll never see it more intense than we will this September.
I can't wait. It is amazing what it has become over the last 20 years. Back when Jack and Arnie and Billy Casper and those guys were dominating plays, it was fine. But now it has become this spectacle that I think has gotten bigger. I can't imagine the PGA of America ever thought it was going to be like this. Is it the biggest event in golf, Bones?
It's right there. This year it is. Certainly with Rory winning the Masters and in the fashion that he did, with everybody watching it, that was huge. And we've got huge tournaments coming up here,
yes,
including the U.S. Open in Oakmont and obviously the Open Championship at Portrush. But the Ryder Cup is massive. It's a little different than these stroke play events, but what it is something that in these players' hearts they strive like crazy to be a part of, and
wow,
nothing that they play in this year will mean more to the players than playing in this Ryder Cup.
Yeah, I kind of got off on that tangent, but you got me excited talking about it. I cannot wait till September. And I'm in Alabama where football is dominant, but believe me, golf's going to be the topic of conversation. All right, Bones, let's get back to caddying for a minute, because listen, when I was growing up down in South Florida, Jack had Angelo, the Greek with the big white afro, and
sure,
Lee Trevino had Herman. Gary Player had Rabbit, who was a character in his own right. And now in the modern era, obviously you and Phil and Stevie with Tiger, Ted Scott, a couple of green jackets with Bubba, and now a couple with Scotty Scheffler. You guys are all famous in your own right for different reasons. But I think today in the modern game, Bones, more responsibility for caddies now, right? Nothing against the guys in the yesteryear, but you guys do more now, don't you?
That's a really good question. Certainly the yardage books are so much more complex. If the folks listening to this saw a yardage book from 1990 and one from 2025, they'd be pretty shocked at how different they are. and how elaborate they now are. They're made professionally by this guy named Mark Long, who makes them for the caddies. And of course, it's the caddies' job to get out there and double check everything and create, what they need for their players to have a successful week. But I know exactly what you're saying. There's so much more goes into it. There would have been, caddies flying to major locations with their players this past week on their way to Philly in preparation for the major this week in Charlotte, especially given the fact that bad weather was on the horizon. I don't want to. I want to be respectful of the previous era,
Right.
but I think that what I do think is I think the players might rely on their caddies more now.
Yes.
Than they did back in the day. Certainly when I started, you would see, some great players. Mark Calcavecchia is a great example. That guy, could win a major championship with a pull cart. He was,
Right.
he had, as we like to say, he had a lot of caddy in him. Curtis Strange was the same way. But now, as we hear with these conversations that are picked up with these very sensitive microphones, the caddies that are extremely involved in what goes on out there. There are caddies on the tour that get involved in players' schedules. It's grown into quite the job.
It is quite the job, and you mentioned Mark Calcavecchia. I played high school golf against Calky back in the day, and nobody was more intimidating in high school than Mark Calcavecchia, Bones. Let me tell you that. But I respect the heck out of what you guys do today. But I think back like 1986 when Jackie was on the bag for Jack. And listen, I played high school golf and college golf against Jackie, and nothing against him. Great player in his own right, but Jack was calling the shots that day and didn't get a lot of advice from Jackie. And again, nothing against that situation. It's just different time, different era. I mean, things change over time.
Yeah, they certainly do, and they evolve. And it's we have guys caddying on the tour now that are former PGA Tour
Yes.
players, as you know, whether it's Willie Wilcox or Lance Tenbrook back in the day. These are very, very skilled people at what they do that could play the game at a very high level. Not that you need to be a great player to be a great caddy, in my opinion, but. The reality is that Tiger Woods changed everybody's lives that caddies for a living. He came on the tour, did what he did, the ratings went up, the purses increased, and of course some of that trickled down to the caddies. So it became a great job to have, a great adventure to go on. But now of course you can really take care of your family if you're lucky enough to caddy for a player that's doing a little bit of damage out there. And I think with that comes extra responsibility and hopefully guys that are taking the job incredibly seriously.
Yeah, listen, I'm a benefactor of what Tiger brought to the table. Who ever thought golf was going to be on the radio before Tiger started winning? You know what I mean? It's crazy what has happened. Hey, before we wrap it up, just give me an NBC Sports Tommy Roy story, Bones, because obviously he's a Hall of Famer and he's been in the booth calling the shots for some of the biggest events, not just golf, but every sport you can imagine. What's it like working with Tommy Roy? I love Tommy, and he and I talk all the time. But what's it like? Is you were a newbie coming on the scene in 2017. You're working with Tommy. What was that like?
It was incredible. I mean, you talked about Calcavecchia, and they used the word intimidating. Tommy Roy is an intimidating guy to work for in a really good way because he is, without question, in my professional life, whether it's golf, caddying, what have you, he's the hardest working person I've ever met in my life.
Wow.
And you can just see that with everything that he does, that, he's a guy home on an off week such as this, and he is thinking about nothing other than what he can do to make the broadcast as good as it can possibly be when he works next at the U.S. Women's Open. So I think that you want to match that level of intensity and do a job that will make him proud. But I owe him so much. He was the guy that had the idea to plug a couple of caddies into potentially doing some television commentary. And I'll tell you a funny story. When the first one we ever did was in 2015 at RSM, where the ratings aren't going to be particularly high because it's up against the NFL, and they said, let's try a couple of caddies there as on-course reporters. And I did a little hit for Golf Channel that he was watching back in his office that week as that led into the tournament, and I literally had chewing gum in my mouth as I was doing this interview. And that's how raw and completely unskilled and a complete lack of knowledge that I was. And I got back to his office and said, you weren't chewing gum during that interview, were you? And I said, as a matter of fact, I was. And I realized then as he looked at me in just complete disgust that I had so much to learn, and I've been very grateful to learn it from him. But he's a wonderful, wonderful guy to work for, and I hope he sticks around and does it a lot longer.
That's good stuff. It really is. And as we wrap it up, I do have to tell our audience, Bones, he obviously was caring for Phil for years. And then I got to know you better when you started working, obviously, on television. And we would talk about the St. Louis Cardinals because your neighbor is Paul Goldschmidt, the great baseball player. And when he went from the Diamondbacks to the Cardinals, I'm a huge Cardinals fan, MVP with the Cardinals, of course, now Goldies with the Yankees. But as we talked, and then one day I'm at the WM Phoenix Open on a Saturday, and one of the guys that works with you comes out, I think I was on like the 8th or 9th hole, and he says, hey, Bones wanted to give you this bat, a Paul Goldschmidt bat. And Bones, it was incredible, although I had to carry it around the rest of the day. And Scotty Scheffler's dad is like, why are you carrying a bat? And so I had to explain it to him. And then trying to get TSA to put it on the plane and fly home was amazing. But Bones, I do thank you for that. And it's led to some incredible stories for me over the years. And listen, in my office here, I still have the Goldie bat. It's in a prominent spot.
That's what I love to hear. That's great. He's a good man, and that's a good bat to have. Hopefully he's got plenty of hits left in the bats he's using there in New York. But I was just thinking to myself, if you were ever going to have to carry a bat at a tournament, Waste Management might not be the worst one, given the fact that's the rowdiest place that we go to on the tour. But I'm so glad you got a kick out of it.
Yeah, it was great, and it was funny. Scotty Scheffler's dad, and he was very nice. He's like, hey, Doug, how you doing? Oh, by the way, can I ask you a question? I'm like, sure. He goes, why do you have a baseball bat? And I was like, it took you a while to get around to that, but I knew where you were leading. Hey, Bones, we appreciate it, my friend. It really has been great catching up, and we will see you as soon as NBC gets back out on the circuit. And you guys got some big events coming up, so I look forward to seeing you.
Doug, I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. I hope the listeners have a great day.
Thanks, Bones.